In 1987, the county of Derbyshire saw a new major theme park open, the first UK theme park to transport visitors into fully fledged lands of cowboys and Native Americans. A place where gunfights broke out on the streets of Silver City, and runaway trains would take you into the heart of a mountain. A theme park packed full of potential, installing wonder and awe in the hearts of many who visited it. After multiple years of bad choices and neglect, that place full of potential, the American Adventure theme park, closed forever. In the 1970s, a plot of land in Derbyshire was earmarked for a private leisure development. The land had previously been used for coal mining, which had since stopped, and the local council was trying to decide what to do with the land. In 1979, an agreement was formed to use part of Shipley Country Park to create a new private development of a theme park based around the best of all things British. Derbyshire County Council granted Kent-based KLF Group a 100-year lease on the 350-acre land. Estimated to be worth £18 million, Britannia Park was to feature a grand entrance with shops and cafes, a traditional village green where you could observe a blacksmith at work, along with a craft village which would showcase a fine array of British crafts. Further inside, you would find a small world area, which would feature miniatures designed to showcase landmarks at a 1/25th scale, a fairground section with basic rides known as Adventureland, as well as the highlight of the park, which was to be a British Ingenious exhibit that would feature 8 pavilions where commercial investors could highlight the importance of their products in everyday British life, inspired by the classic world fairs. Envisioned as a grand new idea, the new park would be plagued with problems from the start. Locals caught wind of the new agreement for the new park, and as Brits do when a new theme park offering is planned, they complained. Mostly about the concept and its expected traffic and noise pollution. There was a huge amount of political infighting during the planning of the park, which ended with a prolonged court battle. The courts found the original agreement invalid, which eventually led to KLF claiming over £11 million from the Derbyshire County Council. With the 100-year lease intact, along with gaining an extra £4 million from commercial investors, the funds were in place to begin to finance their park, and construction began on Britannia Park. The plans were huge for the time, inspired by Epcot Center at Walt Disney World. The park's reputation in the area, though, was largely negative, after upsetting most nearby residents and taxpayers with the lawsuit. The developers promised that the final result would be worth it and would gain back trust from this bad reputation when they finally saw what was created. They did not. Britannia Park opened on June 27, 1985, far from completion, with a flyover from the famous Concorde and a speech by heavyweight champion Henry Cooper. From the start, KLF ran into money troubles. They had hoped sponsors would come to cover some of the £20 million cost, just as the sponsors of Epcot had for each pavilion of that $800 million park. Only 5 of the British Genius pavilions were occupied, which included the National Coal Board, the Royal Mint, and the Bass Beer Brewery. Outside was around half a mile of miniature railway line, and that was all the park had to offer on opening day. Charging £3 for adults, it was not only expensive for the time, but also did not offer nearly any of the promised elements. The rest of the park was a muddy mess, not even landscape. The mud was due to most of the 1985 season being a washout, with heavy rain daily, which halted further construction efforts as well as reduced visitor numbers. Only weeks after opening, KLF was selling shares in its business to pay off the creditors and staff were laid off. Britannia Park would only last 12 weeks before closing on September 9, 1985. No buyers wanted to buy the mess of the park, and Derby County Council ended up bailing out KLF by buying back the lease for £2.5 million. KLF founder Peter Keller was later imprisoned for fraud after one of the longest criminal trials in UK history. The chairman of Britannia Park also received a 6-month prison sentence. Henry Cooper never did get paid for his appearance. At this point, in steps John Rigby, who created the Camelot theme park in Chorley, which had opened in 1984. John, backed by Granada Media, wanted to capitalize on the success of Camelot. He negotiated a new 100-year lease with the council in August 1986. Far from the all things British theme, he believed there would be room for a fully fledged Cowboys versus Native Americans theme park. This idea would become the American Adventure. With a good infrastructure already in place, all that was needed was to cover over the remnants of the Britannia Park and apply his ideas. The new overlay for the Britannia Park was to be split into two sections, the Native Americans on one side and the Cowboys on the other. To make sure you didn't arrive thinking you were at the Best of Britain Park, the entrance would be covered in stars and stripes. This was now something completely different. The British Genius Pavilion, which was now just an empty warehouse, was covered in the iconic fiberglass faces that are hard to forget if you visited the park, with a brand new huge play area inside for young visitors, called Pioneers Playland. Moving over from here, guests would find a replica of the Alamo structure, and behind this a large arena where the Wild West Shootout would perform shows daily. Live entertainment was billed as a key part of the American Adventure experience. Down by the 32-acre lake, a Zamperla Buffalo Power Coaster was located, along with real buffalo. The park also featured a petting zoo with many different American animals, along with an adventure playground. The lakeside contained several shops and restaurants, a pirate ship named Yankee Clipper, and a wagon-themed Ferris wheel originally named the Chuck Wagon Ferris Wheel, and later the High Sierra. Deeper into the park, you would reach the cowboy area at Silver City, with theming that made you feel like you were walking directly into a Western movie. Shootouts would happen twice a day, and the winner received a show from the girls next door at Lazy Little Saloon. At the end of the park was a gigantic fiberglass mountain, which contained not one, but two rides. A powered runaway mine train, Thunder Mountain, as well as the log flume, Cherokee Falls. Running the length of the park was an adapted version of the miniature railway built for the Britannia Park. One of the only things that they did complete for its opening was now called the Santa Fe Railway. The park had been completely transformed from what was opened 2 years prior. It was now the UK's first fully fledged theme park, full of fun attractions, incredible live entertainment, and a fully themed experience that opened just weeks before Chessington World of Adventure, which had just been rebuilt by John Wardley.
What's the American Adventure like? Awesome.
The American Adventure at Ilkeston, Derbyshire, just off Junction 26 of the M1.
The American Adventure opened in June 1987. While the park was small, there was plenty of space to expand with bigger thrills. The American Adventure was known as Britain's major new theme park. Within the first year of operation, 400,000 guests had visited the park. The following year, investments continued, with the addition of the new Fort St. Lawrence area and a £2.5 million Great Niagara Falls Rapids, with huge 12-seater queue-eating boats. The Rapids ride was considered to be one of the best of its kind to exist within the UK, though even today the competition has never been very strong. I'm looking at you, Rumba Rapids. Further additions included live show improvements, a balloon race ride, and all staff working within the parks were fitted with full costumes. The cleaning crew were dressed as Mohican Indians. Food offerings also improved, with T-bone steak at the Bum Steer Trading Post or tasty chicken and ribs at Mars Eats. The impressive park only had competition from its sister park Camelot, the emerging Alton Towers, and the newly converted Chessington Zoo. The opening 2 seasons were not a huge success and did not do as well financially as hoped. John Rigby parted ways with Granada after 2 years, and the focus on cowboys and Native Americans stopped being the focus of the park shortly after. The bad reputation still lingered from the disaster of the Britannia Park, which the media focused repeatedly on. The American Adventure worked to try and counter this though by increasing advertising efforts, and in the 1989 season were hopeful to increase guest numbers due to one new addition. A brand new signature ride, the Missile. The new roller coaster was opened by Buzz Aldrin, 20 years after he touched down on the moon.
The trip that I had both in the Gemini spacecraft and also in the Apollo Saturn rocket were just very smooth, just couldn't be better.
Whereas this was a bit bumpy.
Well, but this one isn't going that far.
A second-hand Vekoma boomerang from the Glasgow Garden Festival of 1988. The ride was added to the end of the park and was known for a short time as the most intense ride in the UK, even though a nearly identical version existed 4 years earlier at West Midlands Safari Park from 1985 to 1991. The surrounding area was rethemed as Spaceport USA, costing £4 million, half of the original park's budget. Included in this new area was the Black Hole, a Huss Ben Hur swirl ride previously at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. This year also saw the original miniature railway modified to now complete a full circuit of the park, making it useful for transportation.
The American Adventure Theme Park.
1991 would be the park's most popular season. A Vekoma Canyon Trip ride was added in the Alamo section, but not much else. In 1993, the Cowboys vs. Natives theme was officially dropped completely, with the park being repainted all over in red, white and blue. One change though, during 1993, would make a huge impact with the ride most people would remember the park for, Cherokee Falls. At the time of its construction in 1987, was the tallest flume ride in the UK, a title taken by Thorpe Park's Loggers Leap in 1989. American Adventure set out to regain this title by adding a third drop that would beat Loggers Leap's 50-foot drop with a 60-foot drop and added a rotating tunnel at the lift hill. The ride would now be known as Nightmare Niagara. To avoid confusion with the Great Niagara Rapids, they were renamed to the Grand Canyon Rapids and eventually renamed to the Rocky Mountain Rapids. Unfortunately, the park rarely advertised this addition, but for those who rode it, Nightmare Niagara would undoubtedly be the highlight of the park. The 8th season in 1994 was not great for the American Adventure, with competition really starting to heat up around the UK.
In 1994, the dream became a reality. The year the tallest roller coaster in the world came to Britain.
Blackpool Pleasure Beach added the tallest roller coaster in the world, with the big one. Drayton Manor added the stand-up coaster Shockwave. And Alton Towers got their first heavily themed roller coaster, created by John Wardley, Nemesis, each of which gained huge media attention and popularity, while the American Adventure was just kind of forgotten. To try and compete, the American Adventure opened the Motion Master Theatre in the Mount Rushmore area, a 4D experience where you'd be strapped into a seat which moved with the movie on screen. The first movie shown featured RoboCop and replaced the popular Pioneer Playland. While it was quite a unique and fun experience, it was just no match to the offerings added at the competition. A go-kart track was also added, replacing the popular but expensive live horse stunt show. The Cowboy Shootout at the time merged into the horse show to become the Cowboy Stunt Show in Silver City. None of these additions helped though, and the only option was for the American Adventure to add a new roller coaster. In 1995, a theme park in Yorkshire, Lightwater Valley, was in administration and was looking to sell their double looping Super Looper back to its manufacturer. American Adventure purchased it, and the ride was placed in the area that previously housed Canyon Trip, which had moved to Camelot. The ride wouldn't be themed to America at all though, and Granada decided to theme it after the popular Granada TV show Gladiators, calling it Iron Wolf. The decision to buy the uninspiring ride was so rushed it still had Lightwater Valley logos on it the first year. The Alamo section of the park would become the Gladiators Arena. The ride was actually opened by the Gladiator Wolf in April 1995, who had actually opened Nemesis the year before at Alton Towers. A much more thrilling theme and just an overall better ride. 1995 also saw another Granada brand, Sooty, replace the Wild West show, along with Aliens replacing the RoboCop movie in the Motion Master Theatre. Eventually this would change to an Indiana Jones movie and again change a couple of times after that. Attendance though continued to suffer. With the huge additions at the other parks, the American Adventure was unable to compete. The park no longer had any interest to continue the detailed theming throughout, which set it apart in the first place. By 1996, the park was a jumbled mess of IPs for Granada, and the following year marked the pivotal point in the park's history leading to its demise. 1997 marked a major change. Granada decided they didn't actually want to run a theme park, and sold the lease and assets of the park to Venture World, which was led by ex-Alton Towers founder John Broome. All of the Granada branding was quickly removed and an extra charged Sky Coaster was installed. The Sky Coaster was the largest ride of its type outside of the United States, with a height of 200 feet and cost £1.7 million. It would propel 3 thrill seekers up to speeds of 80 miles per hour flying over the ground. As a guest visitor in 1997, the park was hopeful to get new investments and the future still had potential. 1998 saw the addition of the short-lived Flying Island from Vekoma. This ride was reported to cost £2 million and it lifted riders 200 feet into the air for a scenic view of the park. It was opened by Boyzone as part of a $5 million investment into the park. From even before it opened, it was plagued with technical issues. This year also saw the closure of the grand entrance, which had been there since Britannia Park. The ground at the entrance was suffering from issues from the old mining days. It was slowly sinking into the ground and was eventually going to collapse. One of the most welcoming and best looking areas of the park was closed off, and a new temporary entrance took its place. Rather than the incredible feeling of seeing the park unfold in front of you as you entered, the new entrance was rather ugly and made the park's layout much worse. A refurb of the old entrance was announced, but never came to be. John also didn't like the all-American theme, and planned to rename the park to Adventure World. He immediately changed the park's name to American Adventure World in preparation for the changeover. Even the flags flying in the horseback show were changed from all-American to a variety of countries. With the changes, he also had ideas for an inverted B&M and a wooden coaster to be added to the park. The planned new direction would see most of the original theme removed, with Silver City left to represent the USA and Fort Lawrence left to represent Canada. Sadly, again, none of this ever happened, and in 1998 a report outlined losses of £1.3 million. John Broome announced he was leaving in 1999. The THG Group, who also owned Blackpool Tower, bought the park. In the year 2000, the park's name was returned to the American Adventure, and the Flying Island was removed after just 2 years. With Broome's departure, the fate of the American Adventure was inevitable. The park added no new rides without an upcharge, and many smaller rides were removed or sectioned off. Maintenance was minimal, and structures were badly in need of paint. The Missile's track colour changed to a murky brown. Niagara's tunnel would stop rotating, and most of the features were turned off on the Rocky Mountain Rapids. The park that had so much potential 10 years earlier was beginning to look run down. JCB World was added in 2003, rumoured to be at a cost of £750,000, offering guests the chance to spend 5 minutes using real JCB diggers, charging an additional £4.95 of course. Eventually, they did change the experience to be a free attraction for guests. Twin Looper, the renamed Iron Wolf, was now known as the JCB Twin Looper. The biggest blow though would come the following year. A park map was released, but areas were completely missing. Spaceport and Fort St. Lawrence were nowhere to be found, but the worst was that Nightmare Niagara was missing. It was the end of the UK's largest log flume. The new park management had decided to target a new family-friendly children's audience. Gone was the highly detailed, thrilling, fun and fitting rides, and instead was 3 flat rides, a kids carousel, a rocking tug, and a fire brigade ride, all cheap, pre-theme rides that can be found anywhere, that looked sorely out of place. To say this year was unpopular is a huge understatement. Nightmare Niagara was no more and was demolished. The title of the tallest log flume went back to Fort Park. By 2005 though, the park was such a shambles that barely anybody cared except fans of the attraction's closing. During this season, one of those fans sent the park a suggestion letter to try and suggest some ways to save the park, which so many had previously loved. The park director at the time replied, saying, "We know what we're doing and the industry was not as straightforward as you may think. The future was in children's rides." The park was a shell of its former self, and the potential it had was all gone. The Missile would remain in the park, standing but not operating throughout the 2005 season, before being sold to Pleasurewood Hills in 2006, where it was rebranded as Wipeout and still operates today. Fort St. Lawrence and the Rocky Mountain Rapids did reopen for 2006, even after it was announced it would be closed due to structural instability and water pollution problems. A small Zamperla mine train was added around the site formerly occupied by Nightmare Niagara's third drop, aiming for that new family image, but rubbing salt in the wounds of fans of one of the best attractions in the UK. Many of the buildings in the park were just standing but abandoned. A new marketing campaign promoted it as a place for cartoons and family rides, but nothing could save the dying park. On January 4th, 2007, after 19 years of operation, the American Adventure announced it would not be reopening, as many of the park's rides as possible were auctioned off. Buffalo Stampede went to Twin Lakes Theme Park. The Runaway Mine Train was purchased by James Mellors, where it was converted to a travelling ride. Mini Mine Rush, which opened for just one season, was relocated to Flamingo Land and operates as the Runaway Mine Train. Finally, the Twin Looper was moved to Poland, where it still operates today in its third home. Some of the smaller rides went to the Billing Aquadrome, which also purchased the remains of the Santa Fe Railroad, the one remaining attraction from Britannia Park. An auction for all the remaining items left in the park just months after the park shut for good was held on May 12, 2007. Over 1,300 lots were up for grabs and now exist out there all around the world, including the logs from the destroyed Nightmare Niagara. What remained was left to rot, abandoned. While the park sat abandoned, after its closure, much of what was left was eventually removed. In 2012, it was announced that the land would be redeveloped into housing and leisure facilities. Many petitions were formed over that time, some with as many as 10,000 signatures, to try and reopen the park. After 12 years, in 2019, the final concrete footers and remnants of the park retaken by nature were fully removed, and construction began on the housing. The American Adventure was once one of the largest and most popular theme parks in the UK. A theme park with so much potential to become something so great that sadly, due to so many poor choices, ended up closed and abandoned. A place that held so many unique experiences in the hearts of many, where families came to create memories and be transported to a different land. The exact place my parents took my family to be transported to that different land, where I rode my first major coaster or plunged 60 feet on the UK's tallest log flume. A place that will always have a special place in my heart and instilled my love of theme parks. A place of American adventure. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Expedition Extinct. If you enjoyed it, make sure you subscribe to join the expedition. What was the theme park that forged your love of them? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram for updates on upcoming episodes, and a special thank you to our Patreons for supporting the channel. We will see you next time.